9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And it's me again at 1 p.m. Welcome to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I am Liam Halligan. And for the next hour, we'll be talking about online fraud, which surged during lockdown. Over £1.3 billion was lost to so-called authorised push payment and other online fraud scams. Last year, that's 44% up on 2020. And with the scammers ahead of the authorities, it seems, we hold a detailed discussion. Plus, just imagine forking out for a foreign holiday, then your flight's cancelled and you miss out. And then it turns out that your travel insurance policy doesn't protect against flight cancellations. Well, 40% of travel insurance policies don't. Again, we dig into the detail. On the Money, after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's just 2 minutes past 1. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Cabinet Office Minister Michael Ellis says Boris Johnson was made aware in late 2019 of concerns relating to Chris Pincher when he was a Foreign Office Minister. It's after a senior civil servant accused Number 10 of not telling the truth over claims that Boris Johnson wasn't aware of an official complaint about the MP's behaviour. Downing Street says Mr Johnson was aware of unsubstantiated claims when Mr Pincher was made Deputy Chief Whip. Speaking in the Commons during urgent questions in the last few minutes, Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, said Mr Johnson's defence has been completely blown apart.
Prime Minister was personally informed about these allegations, and yet he was either negligent or complicit. What message, Mr Speaker, does this send about the standards of this government and what they set? What message does this send to the British people facing a cost of living crisis while their government is paralysed with scandal?
We do have a Parliament, Mr Speaker, as you know, that upholds standards to cover all of those in public life. But it is incumbent upon us not to prejudge these decisions. No system can replace the fundamental importance of personal responsibility. We all know this to be true. Codes and rules and oversight bodies are there to guide us, but we all ultimately, in public life, must choose for ourselves how to act.
That was the Cabinet Office Minister Michael Ellis speaking, and before that we heard the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner. Now, a public inquiry into the death of an unarmed father of two concludes he was lawfully killed, but found there were numerous failures throughout the operation. 28-year-old Jermaine Baker was shot at close range by police whilst taking part in an attempted prison break in 2015. He was one of three men waiting in a stolen Audi trying to help two inmates escape a prison van. An anonymous officer told the inquiry he fired a single shot when he saw Baker's hand moving up towards a bag on his chest. Tennis player Nick Kyrgios has been summoned to court in Australia to face a charge of common assault against his ex-girlfriend. Australian police said he would face a magistrate's court next month. The player has made the Wimbledon quarter-finals and is due to play tomorrow. Sweden and Finland have taken the next steps in becoming members of NATO this morning. 30 NATO allies have signed off on Sweden and Finland joining the alliance. It's the most significant expansion since the mid-1990s. Before they're officially in the alliance, they must be approved by all the individual parliaments, member countries. That can take up to a year. In the US, a man's been arrested following a mass shooting at a 4th of July celebration parade in Chicago. 6 people were shot dead after a gunman opened fire with a high-powered rifle from a rooftop. Around 30 people, including a child, were seriously injured. Police say a 22-year-old suspect named as Robert E. Crimo has been detained. Elsewhere in the country, 2 police officers were killed in another Independence Day celebration in Philadelphia. The mayor, Jim Kenney, says he's concerned every single day.
So everything we have in the city over the last 7 years, I worry about. I don't enjoy 4th of July. I don't enjoy the Democratic National Convention. I didn't enjoy the NFL draft. I'm waiting for something bad to happen all the time.
Applications to join the police force in Scotland have dropped by more than half in the last year. There were just over 2,200 applications, down from more than 5,600 the previous year. Staff are currently in a pay dispute with Police Scotland. Since Friday, officers have not been starting shifts early or taking radio equipment home when their duty ends as part of a protest. 6 people have been charged over invading the circuit at the Formula One British Grand Prix over the weekend. Northamptonshire Police says the group, aged between 21 and 46, have all been charged with conspiracy to cause public nuisance. They sat down on the track at Silverstone on Sunday after the race had to be stopped when one of the drivers had crashed. Well, all 6 individuals will appear at Northampton Magistrates Court today. The NHS is going to trial using drones to send chemotherapy drugs, aiming to speed up deliveries of vital medicines that have a short shelf life. An initial trial is going to see drugs carried from Portsmouth to the Isle of Wight. That should cut the journey time from 4 hours to 30 minutes. It's hoped the programme will pave the way for same-day delivery of medical supplies from anywhere in the country. This is GB News, and I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Liam for today's On the Money.
And coming up on the money today, over £1.3 billion was lost to so-called authorised push payments and other online fraud last year. That's 44% up on 2020. With the scammers ahead of the authorities, we host a detailed discussion with APP experts and a victim of this crime. Plus, we talk travel chaos as British Airways, Ryanair and EasyJet get set to strike this summer. But with 40% of travel insurance policies not covering you for cancelled flights, we speak to an expert for their take on how to protect your money and indeed your sanity. Plus, each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we meet female entrepreneur, broadcaster and public speaker Arti Halai. After 15 years of working in the TV industry, both on and off camera, Arti now focuses on writing and empowering passionate women and young adults on their journey to success. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. I'll read out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan and you're On the Money. Now, over £1.3 billion, that's £1,300 million, was stolen by con artists from innocent UK victims last year in so-called authorised push payment or APP and other online fraud scams. During lockdown, the amount of online retail and other e-commerce surged. Many more of us bought goods and services over the internet, and that seems unlikely to change anytime soon. But it's clear the UK has a serious online fraud problem. And on the latest numbers, the criminals, scammers and con artists are way ahead of the authorities. Last year, over 730 million was lost to APP, that's that authorised push payment fraud. This is where the account holder is tricked into approving a payment to an account controlled by the criminal. On top of that, another 530 million was lost to unauthorised fraud, where the account holder doesn't give permission for the payment. So under those two categories, total online fraud reached 1.3 billion last year. That's according to the UK industry body UK Finance. That's 44% up on 2020. Online criminals have become adept at impersonating the NHS, banks, government departments via phone calls, texts, emails, fake websites and social media posts, tricking victims into handing over personal and financial information. A growing form of APP fraud, believe it or not, involves scammers sending emails to business accounts departments, pretending to be the CEO, the big boss, asking senior staff to make urgent payments to suppliers and other third parties. The bottom line is that no one is immune from this. Even sophisticated professionals are being duped out of thousands, tens of thousands of pounds via APP and other forms of online fraud. And there's growing concern that banks aren't making enough effort to prevent online fraud or to identify the origins of accounts where money is being illegally funneled. And that's our On the Money question today. Online fraud. Who's to blame? Grown-up conversations with people who know their stuff about important issues. That's what we do here on The Money. And today, we're joined by Jane Smith. She's a former lawyer and a victim of APP fraud. She's a highly trained, Oxford-educated lawyer, but Jane's case shows that even the smartest among us aren't safe from highly sophisticated fraudsters. Because Jane was conned into transferring nearly £30,000 after criminals pretended to be for the fraud prevention team from her bank, Santander. Now, half of all APP victims don't get their money back because their bank refuses to reimburse them. Jane eventually did after a huge struggle and after speaking out about her case. She now wants to prevent others falling foul of APP fraud. And she's also concerned that banks seem unwilling or unable to trace where lost money is ending up. We're also joined by Katie Warrabeck. She's Managing Director, Economic Crime at UK Finance. That's the industry body which produced the figures I referred to earlier. And in the studio for this important discussion, we have Myron Jobson. He's Senior Professional Finance Analyst at Interactive Investor. And, of course, Miss Money Magpie herself. On the Money Regular, it's Jasmine Birtles. Good to see you all, albeit under very concerning and difficult circumstances. Jane, we've talked a bit over recent weeks and months. Good to have you on the show. You very successfully highlighted your case. In particular, you have managed, after a long struggle, to get your money back. It seems to me that your case shows... Oh, we have lost Jane. She will come back to us, I'm sure. We've just got a comms issue there, a communications issue. Jane, are you still with us?
I can hear you.
Jane, just to say, it's good to have you on the show. Just tell us a little bit about your case, a case which shows that even very sophisticated, legal practitioners, financial services professionals are not protected, are not immune to this online fraud.
Well, I noticed on my bank statement last October that 2 online payments had been made on the same day for £40, but that was not app fraud. That was the sort of ordinary fraud where someone clones your card or pinches your card and makes a few online payments before you can cancel the card. Then in March, I was contacted by a caller on my mobile number who said my account had been compromised, that he represented Santander's fraud investigations team. They thought that it was possible that customer details were being sold or disclosed from within the bank to fraudsters for this purpose. And in order to facilitate their investigation, could I move money from my account with them to named and number accounts with Barclays, which I did. And then the same thing happened again in April, where twice the amount, in fact, was transferred in April to a different bank, which trades as Cash Plus Bank. So the totality of it was £30,000.
It's a huge amount of money, Jane, to anybody. And what really, I have to say it again, you're a lawyer by training. You're a very sophisticated person. You've got a background in the financial world, no less. And the fact that even you were duped by this, I must say, a lot of people would feel ashamed. The fact that you did fight your case, you did get your money back from Santander. You contacted me to highlight this case. You do want to speak out to prevent this happening to other people. I must say, Jane, it's to your credit that you're doing that, and more power to your elbow. You also have a concern, don't you, about the attitude of the banks in general, notwithstanding that you did eventually get your money back from Santander.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the principal wrongdoers in all of this are, of course, the fraudsters themselves. But that's not much comfort once your money has gone, because these people hardly ever get caught. The simplest way to stop APP fraud is just to hang up on anybody who you may feel is not genuine. And the banks say that is exactly what they warn customers to do. But those warnings are clearly not cutting through, given the increase in the magnitude of this fraud. And when it comes to claims for compensation or for recompense from the banks, although there is a code which most banks have signed up to, the tendency seems to be to try to shift the blame onto the victim for failing to protect themselves, whereas in fact, I would argue that the banks have very sophisticated systems for detecting suspicious activity on customers' accounts and should not simply execute these instructions, even though they look as though they've been authorised by a customer. If there's something suspicious or unusual, their legal duty is to act as an ordinary prudent banker would, and that means they're on inquiry, they hold off on the payment until they've satisfied themselves that it is genuine and it hasn't been prompted by fraudulent activity.
Well, Jane, you are an astonishingly articulate person. It's been quite a journey for you. Again, I salute your efforts to bring this to public notice, not just to sweep it under the carpet. Now, through your skill and persistence, you've managed to get your money back. Santander, your bank, aren't here. We did ask them to appear. I should read out a statement from them, and I will do that now before we move on to our other guests. We have the utmost sympathy, says Santander, for anyone who falls victim to the criminals who carry out these scams. We would urge customers not to automatically believe someone is who they say they are. Always validate independently who you're speaking to before making a payment. And if you're unsure, call your bank using the number on the back of your card or by dialing 159. So we heard that from Jane Smith. Let's now move on to Katie Warrabeck. Jane will stay with us and we'll come back to her. Katie's Managing Director of Economic Crime at UK Finance. That's an industry body. Katie, UK Finance are highlighting this issue. Pretty astonishing increase in online crime, authorised push payment fraud, where people give their authorisation for a payment, and indeed unauthorised payment, where people quite simply just pinch money off you in a different way. That's an astonishing increase, isn't it? A 44% rise in a year.
Yes, that's right, which is very good that your programme is highlighting this. And particularly, I think that, anybody can fall foul of these fraudsters. So it's really important that we raise awareness about these types of scams, particularly the ones where people are impersonating either the bank or in some cases the police, where people think they're doing the right thing, but in fact, police or indeed your bank will never ask you to move money from one account to another. That simply doesn't happen. So the more we raise awareness of that, the better it will be for everybody, I guess.
Maren, let's turn to you, Maren Jobson. You're a senior personal finance analyst at Interactive Investor. Your company is very much customer facing. You're advising people what to do with their money. But at the most basic level, if you've got people, Oxford-educated lawyers like Jane Smith, who we just heard from, victims of this fraud, and not all of them, or many of them, won't have the wherewithal that she's got to finally get their money back after launching a personal campaign. It's a pretty difficult state of affairs, isn't it?
Oh, gosh, I mean, you're completely right, Liam. I mean, the UK is in the midst of a fraud epidemic. It's very clear, and especially during the pandemic, a lot of shysters, a lot of these unscrupulous fraudsters shrouded their nefarious schemes among the uptick of legitimate correspondence from the government and other organisations related to COVID. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been burnt. And it's just an ever-growing problem that needs to be tackled. And it's hard because it's just an ever-growing beast. And we have individual responsibilities to ensure that we don't fall victims. But, the industry, the financial industry more broadly, also has a role to play.
And it's not just victims. It's, your business that you work, it's a legitimate online business. It's about moving money around online. You are the interactive investor. It's giving, all online businesses, a huge psychological barrier that their customers have to overcome. Jasmine, again, you run a customer-facing online business and advisory service, moneymagpie.com, of course. Where are the cops?
Well, absolutely. And, I think it's, as you said at the beginning, that the banks are behind the fraudsters. The fraudsters are always a few steps ahead. I mean, Jane's example shows, that they're really clever to take 2 lots of 40 quid out of her account, because then you'd think, yes, of course, I've got some problems. And I agree with her also that the big problem, I think, is banks not really, not really looking into the account that's receiving that
That's right,
money.
and that's precisely Jane Smith's point.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to
That's
that.
the issue.
I mean, they must know where these accounts
KYC.
originate. KYC, all of us who've worked in financial services know your clients.
Exactly.
AML, anti-money laundering stipulations.
Where's that?
They're a headache, it's bureaucracy, it's red tape, but it has to be done. Because surely these criminals can only continue to thrive if they know that their own bank account where they're receiving the money, they're never going to get their collar felt by the authorities.
Exactly. And I don't understand how this is happening because, if you set up any account with any sort of financial institution, you have to fill in all these forms, you have to take a photograph, so, you practically want blood, really. So if these, the criminals are getting round these systems, so it is incumbent on the banks to make these systems much tighter, I think.
Well, we will carry on this discussion after the break. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Don't go anywhere. We will hear more on these issues of APP and other online fraud, the scale of which has skyrocketed over the last year, not least because so many more of us were doing business online during lockdown. Your emails are coming in thick and fast. This is a subject that is really catching your interest, and rightly so. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's 1:24. You're On the Money. Now over £1.3 billion, 1,300 million proper money was lost to so-called authorised push payment and other forms of online fraud last year. That's a 44% rise on 2020. Today we're asking here on The Money, online fraud, who's to blame? A really astonishing panel, not least Jane Smith, former lawyer, victim of APP online fraud that cost her tens of thousands of pounds. Eventually, after pursuing the issue doggedly and a publicity campaign, she did finally get her money back from her bank, Santander, who deny all wrongdoing. Jane, let's go back to you. You're joining us from the Isle of Arran. As I say, chapeau to you. Respect for getting your money back after a concerted campaign. Your interest now, I think, has switched not just to helping other victims of APP fraud, making them aware so they think hard before making payments. You're also concerned, not least given your background training as a lawyer, about where this money ends up, why banks can't identify the accounts where the ill-gotten gains end up going to and then informing the police.
Yeah, well, the victim oneself has to inform the police because fraud is a crime. So you report it obviously to your own bank and their fraud investigations team, but you report it also to the police, and that can sometimes be a bit sticky. The police, there is a jurisdictional problem which arose in my case because my money was transferred from a bank account in Scotland to bank accounts in England, and Police Scotland were told that because the money had gone into English bank accounts, Police Scotland had no jurisdiction to investigate its whereabouts and its eventual destination. And certainly, I mean, that's the first stage of the transfer, but the second stage is when the money is whipped out of the initial recipient account and then moved on, often overseas. So there really is a problem in terms of following the money to its destination.
It seems crazy, though, Jane. I'm sure you'd agree that if a bank paid you the money back, which in this case they did, they must know where the money went to, and the identity of the person behind that bank account receiving the stolen money, the stolen goods, must be known to someone somewhere within the financial services industry. Why are they covering up for criminals?
Well, the whole point of APP fraud is that the way it's perpetrated is that the victim is given a named, numbered account in which to transfer the money, and then it's possible from the sort code to identify which bank that is. So the victim's own bank knows where the money went.
Yeah, exactly.
It's where it goes on after that that's the problem.
Let's move on to Katie Warrabeck. Katie, we heard from you before the break. You are the Director of Economic Crime at UK Finance, the industry body which produced the figures that we're highlighting today, showing a 44% rise in online fraud over the last year. Let me ask you, I'm a former asset manager. I'm versed in these the ways of moving money between countries, between accounts. It's a very sophisticated business, but at all stages, pretty much, to a mind-numbing extent, you've got these Know Your Client KYC regulations, you've got these AML anti-money laundering regulations. I'll ask you, if someone like Jane has her money nicked and it goes to an account, and even if it then goes to another account and another account, surely a determined person, investigation by the authorities could determine who has eventually ended up benefiting from this stolen money. Why isn't it happening?
So I think it's worth making a few points here. The first thing is that it's not necessarily that the accounts are being opened by fraudsters and that KYC is failing. What we're increasingly seeing is that these so-called money mule accounts, these money mules, are recruited through social media and other online means to actually allow their accounts to be used for money to be passed through. We see these sort of advertising all the time on social media. And it's one of the reasons why we're really keen to ensure that online platforms and social media platforms do their bit to try and close down the recruitment of these money mules. Because what happens is the accounts are used, the money passes through those accounts, they're quickly split up and moved into other accounts, and it becomes quite a nightmare to follow it through. So if we were able to stop the money mule recruitment in the first place, we would really close down some of the opportunities of the fraudsters have to move money about the system.
Myron Jobson of Interactive Investor, as I said, you work for an extremely authoritative, reputable online company. Interactive Investor, it is what it says on the tin. surely the whole of the financial services industry needs to be campaigning about this, not just victims like Jane Smith, not just gobby journalists like me. Surely the whole of the financial services industry has to say, stop, enough. We have to pour resources into policing this issue.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, knowledge is power. If you don't know, you can't protect yourself against something you don't know. So we, as you quite rightly said, need to work together as an industry to flag new frauds, things that we see that we haven't seen before, and just spread it to our customers and use every form of communication, letters, social media, to make sure that people are aware of the dangers that lie out there. And it's quite interesting. I think it's interesting the fact that the Financial Ombudsman's Service upholds around 3/4 of reimbursement claims.
Interesting.
It shows that a lot more could be done, and that system.
But the stress. The stress and the people who don't get their money back. Jasmine, where does this end?
Well,
give us some good news.
Yes. Well, we at Money Magpie, honestly, we are constantly sending out emails going, this is the latest fraud, watch out for it. I think the Money Mules point is an extremely good one. And we do need to get the online, Instagram and Facebook, etc., into this, because it's very easy for people, particularly if you need a bit of cash, it sounds like a very easy way to make it.
Well, online fraud, it's a subject we will return to here on The Money. I've got my teeth into it. I've certainly learnt a huge amount from this discussion today, and I hope you have too, GB News viewers and listeners. Thank you to my panel, Jane Smith, former lawyer and victim of APP fraud. We will speak again soon, Jane. Katie Warrabeck of UK Finance, and of course, Myron Jobson and Jasmine Birtles here in the studio. They're staying with me. This is On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's Money Talks interview is with Arti Halai, a female entrepreneur. She's lucky to boast not one but 3 professional careers, from television to investing, entrepreneurship and public speaking. That's 4. I know my maths. She's really done it all. But first, the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
It's 1:32. Good afternoon. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Cabinet Office Minister Michael Ellis has defended the Prime Minister, saying Boris Johnson didn't immediately recall the conversation in late 2019 about Chris Pincher's behaviour. It's after a senior civil servant this morning accused Downing Street of not telling the truth over claims Mr Johnson wasn't aware of official complaints. Mr Pincher resigned last week over allegations he drunkenly groped 2 men, with further historic allegations emerging since. Number 10's been accused of shifting its account of what the Prime Minister knew. Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner said Mr Johnson's defence has been completely blown apart. A public inquiry into the death of an unarmed father of 2 concluded he was lawfully killed, but found there were numerous failures throughout the operation. 28-year-old Jermaine Baker was shot at close range by police whilst taking part in an attempted prison break in 2015. He was one of 3 men waiting in a stolen Audi trying to help 2 inmates escape a prison van. Tennis player Nick Kyrgios has been summoned to a court in Australia to face charges of common assault against his ex-girlfriend. Australian police said he would face a magistrate's court next month. The player's made the Wimbledon quarter-finals and is due to play tomorrow. In the US, a man's been arrested following a mass shooting at a 4th of July parade in Chicago. 6 people were shot dead. 30 were seriously injured after a gunman opened fire with a high-powered rifle from a rooftop. Police say a 22-year-old suspect, Robert Elcrimo, has been detained. Sweden and Finland have taken the next steps in becoming members of NATO this morning. 30 NATO allies have signed off on the Nordic countries joining the alliance. It's the most significant expansion of NATO since the mid-1990s. Now each individual parliaments of member countries gives approval. That can take up to a year. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.199. The pound will buy you €1.165. The price of gold currently stands at £1,500 and 11 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back, it's 1:36 and you're on the money. Summertime and the living is easy. So sang Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong. Well, Ella definitely would have changed her tune today because industrial action, travel chaos and the ongoing cost of living crisis threaten our chances of a relaxing summer. In the latest instalment of this psychodrama, staff at Ryanair, EasyJet and British Airways at Heathrow have voted to strike in the coming months. The pressure on airlines is so severe that EasyJet's Chief Operating Officer, Peter Bellow, resigned from his post yesterday. But what about us, the hopeful holidaygoers who've booked a trip abroad but find their flight has been cancelled? Well, new data from the consumer group, which revealed that as many as 4 in 10 travel insurance policies do not cover for strikes by airports or airline staff, meaning a significant proportion of travellers could find themselves unprotected in the face of industrial action. Well, speaking about how you can protect yourself, it's Fiona McRae. She's Head of Consumer Awareness at Travel Insurance Explained. And I'm still with Myron Jobson in the studio. He's from Interactive Investor. And indeed, we can't keep her away, MissMoneyPackPie.com herself, Jasmine Birtles. Let's go first to Travel Insurance Explained. Fiona, great to have you with us. I was really surprised when I read this Which report. Really? 4 in 10 travel insurance policies don't cover for industrial action?
It's because there is already legislation in place that will protect the consumer should airlines cancel their flights. And they're supposed to give the consumer 2 weeks' notice and then rebook them on alternative flights or pay compensation. Where travel insurance can sometimes step in is if the strike is outside their control. So it could be airport workers or air traffic control. And that's where travel insurers can pick up the risk. But as you've pointed out, it's not on every policy. And the consumers will have to check that the policy that they're buying will cover these strikes. But if they're buying policies today to cover that, even if the cover says it's covered, it's not going to be covered because it's a known event now. So people buying policies today hoping to cover for that strike would not be covered because the strike's already been announced.
Crikey, my head is spinning. You've explained it, but I'm still not sure that I understand, Fiona. A lot of people say that if you buy your holiday through a travel agent, you're more likely to be covered. If you buy it with a credit card rather than a debit card, you're more likely to be covered. Are either of those things true?
Well, if you buy it with a debit or a credit card, if you don't get the service that you've paid for, and you can't get a refund, excuse me, from the airline because for whatever reason, then the debit card would refund you because you haven't had the service that you've paid for with the said credit card. And also the package tour regs also have regulations that will protect the consumer as well, to make sure that they get the service that they've paid for. If not, they'll have the money refunded or compensated in whatever way. But that's why there is regulations to protect the consumer. But there is also top-up cover that they can buy on travel insurance to further protect them. And the cover that they would need to look out for is cover for extraordinary circumstances, or it might be known as unknown event cover, or cancellation for any cause. So they're the keys to look out for. And a lot of the time you need to buy the top-up cover on the policy.
It's a minefield, Jasmine, isn't it? It really is. Again, Fiona has done a great job of explaining it, but it doesn't take away from the complexity. You really have to read the fine print of your holiday travel insurance policy to see if in strike action, when an airline might have just a couple of days' notice, if that, of strike action, they can't inform you. Crikey, it's not very relaxing, is it?
It's not very relaxing.
I'm going to stay in the UK.
Honestly, there seems to be so much around at the moment that makes you think, I think I'll just have a staycation, frankly. Because as you say, you've got these possible cancellations. I mean, I was on a flight I was coming back from somewhere and it was cancelled. And I'm hearing of a lot of cancellations because there isn't the ground staff, so the plane cannot land. So you have all sorts of reasons. But, you know, as Fiona says, you first go to the airline, absolutely, and absolutely true about credit cards as well. Not so much with debit cards. There is some help there, but if it's more than £100 and less than £30,000, you can get your credit card company essentially to give you the money back, and then they go after
they pursue the claim.
Yes, they pursue the claim, which is helpful. Or you could potentially use an insurance broker. There's a website, biba.org.uk, the British Insurance Brokers Association,
which we don't endorse. It's a recommendation.
Yeah, it's just a recommendation, and so they've got lots of insurance brokers. Particularly if you've got a little bit of a complicated situation, maybe you've got some health issues, etc., it can really help to have an insurance broker actually look around for you and get exactly what you need.
Myron Jobson, you going abroad this summer?
I am indeed.
You got travel? You looked at your travel insurance?
I have looked at my travel insurance, but I'm going to look again.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
Story,
Clever man.
Friends go to Malta, but it's just the thing is all of us want to go. Well, a lot of us want to go abroad, especially after
lockdown.
Pandemic, right? There's a pent-up demand for it, and this is just providing a lot of headache. And the thing is, the worry is that some consumers might preemptively cancel their plans, cancel their airline tickets. I say, be careful before doing so, because if you do so, the airline doesn't automatically have an obligation to offer you a full refund. So you just have to wait and see. You have to wait and see. And I just repeat what Jasmine said and what Fiona said earlier. There are ways in which you can claim. You have to look at your travel insurance policies to make sure that you claim not only just for like a replacement flight, for example, but for ongoing travel or hotel booking. For example, with a credit card. It's under Section 75, my memory correct, of the Consumer Credit Act of 1974, and that's where you can, claim between like £100 and £30,000.
Myron Jobson, legal. Fiona, let's go back to you. You are head of consumer awareness at Travel Insurance Explained. So just in a couple of minutes we got left, a lot of people will be unnerved about this conversation. I'm unnerved about this conversation, which is why I'm highlighting it to GB News viewers and listeners. What are your top 2 or 3 tips for people who either haven't yet booked a holiday but want to, or have booked a holiday and are worried? Because there will be more cancelled flights, even if there isn't strike action, just because so many staff left the airline industry during lockdown. Replacing them as the industry gets back up and running is difficult. You have to get airside staff security cleared, which is a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of government agencies involved. It takes a lot of time. So what's your little top tips for our viewers and listeners, Fiona?
So top tip is buy your travel insurance as soon as you book your holiday. That's always the best advice. in the climate at the moment, I would always recommend getting a package holiday. You've got extra protection there under the package tour regs. If possible, pay for your holiday on a credit card because you've also got that extra protection there that we've all just been talking about. So that would be my other top tip. But it's package holiday. Book travel insurance straight away. Check your small print on your travel insurance. Look for the top-up cover that's available. One of the things people have been forgetting about is COVID cover. COVID's on the rise. Make sure you've got a policy that will cover you if you catch COVID and you can't go away on holiday, because not every policy will cover that either. So make sure that you're buying a policy that will cover that and has all the extra COVID add-ons, because COVID's still there and it is on the rise both here and in Europe. So they would be my top tips.
Fiona McRae, Head of Consumer Awareness at Travel Insurance, explained. You've done a great job here for us today. We do thank you for appearing on The Money, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Myron Jobson of Interactive Investor, unveiling a whole new side of his personality as a top-class international lawyer. Great to have you on the show. And indeed, Jasmine Birtles of moneymagpie.com. And so we move on. Let's bring in some of your views now on our main topic that we discuss at the top of the show today, online fraud. Who is to blame? Fiona emailed gbviews@gbnews.uk to say perhaps if the banks actually were open, people would not have to do all these online transactions. Good point. They're always telling you to do online banking. The banks need to do more. Peter says it would be useful if there were an electronic equivalent to cheques. I always worry about bank transfers. And Graham got in touch to say if you don't phone or go to your bank personally to check a phone call claiming to be your bank, surely you're responsible for your losses. Well, Graham, sometimes the bank just isn't there. If you live on the Isle of Arran like Jane Smith, the victim that we talked to at the top of the show, many of those banks have been closed on the Isle of Arran. And Alex emailed us to say the banks are to blame, as they should have due diligence in place to check the establishment of any new customer accounts. If stolen money goes through any account, then the bank should be liable to repay that money back. We had many, many emails and tweets on this. Finally, Paul told us a couple of years ago we received email communication from someone claiming to be an investigation officer from HMRC, that's the taxman at Manchester's Revenue and Customs. Everything about his communication looked suspicious. His spelling and grammar was appalling, and he wanted copies of our bank statements sent to a personal email address. I immediately assumed this was some kind of fraud and asked our accountant to verify his identity. Incredibly, he proved to be genuine. But this was the way even HMRC was operating during the pandemic, and probably still now, as they continue to work from home. Really interesting point there, that maybe the genuine article, the authorities need to smarten themselves up online, so we believe that they are who they say they are. Thanks for all your emails today. We will return to this subject of online fraud because there's an epidemic here in the UK and the authorities seem to be lagging behind the scammers. Now it's time for my daily interview series, Money Talks, and we're joined by broadcaster, entrepreneur, public speaker and author Arti Halai. Now, Arti definitely won't be shy of the cameras today. She spent over 15 years of her professional career working as a TV presenter. Who'd do that for a living? Reporter and producer for some of the UK's largest organisations, including the BBC and ITV. Never heard of them. Covering pivotal moments in British history, from Princess Diana's death to general elections, Arti's also carried out critical reviews for the Commission of Racial Equality and the European Parliament. She's covered the rise of India and Pakistan as nuclear powers, and she's fronted ITV News across the Midlands and Central News for 8 years. Not one, but 3 major careers in television, business and public speaking. She specialises in presentation and media and communication, working with clients like Diageo, Al Jazeera, Virgin Trains and Aston Villa. And here she is, my latest guest on Money Talks. It's Arti Halai. Arti, great to have you in the studio. God, I said all that without breathing.
Oh, there was a lot there. You covered it beautifully. Thank you very much.
So tell us what you're doing at the moment and how this new career that you've got, how it's developed from your life as a TV presenter, which many of our viewers and listeners will recognise you from that. What are you up to now?
Yeah, so I kind of, once I finished the television side of things, I thought I've got all this skill set and businesses could definitely do with some help. And that's really how I spent the next 15 years in television. Sorry, not in television, in business. Just working with businesses on the clarity of their messaging, helping them to design it, to deliver it. And through that work, I gained a really big interest in both the young people of today and in women. And increasingly, that public speaking piece is very much around really championing them and looking at, what the core issues are there and how we can assist them.
Now, like you, like many people who work in television and newspapers as well, particularly business journalists like me, over the years, I've talked to businesses in my spare time and all the rest of it. And I've got some thoughts on this. I wonder what your thoughts are. How good do you think businesses are at communicating? There's a huge public relations industry in this country. In many ways, the UK is sort of the global centre of public relations, incredible agencies like Saatchi and Saatchi and others. How good do you think our businesses are at just getting their message across? Sometimes they really drop the ball, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I think there are two parts to this. And the first is really, I've worked with a huge number of businesses, both corporates and those in the SME as well as FTSE 100s. And a lot of them won't put themselves forward initially anyway, because there's this perception that the media is out to get them. And let's make no mistake. Yeah, but it's true, right? Let's make absolutely no mistake. So much news is bad news, right? All our bulletins are dominated with it. I know, I work like you do in news and current affairs. And really what I try to say to them is, no, you still have a voice. You have a contribution to make. And that's the angle I go in at, to try and say to them, there's a space for you to get your message out there. So that's the first piece, really. And then the second piece is very much around those that are pretty established. And we only need to look now at politics and our leaders. And very few of them actually come across very well at all, because even when they do say something, they're lacking this core piece of authenticity. And we've got a real problem in this country with our leaders and authenticity.
I agree. When I think back to when we were kids, politicians, they would just talk. TV interviews were longer and you'd actually really get to know somebody. To be honest with you, what we're trying to do here on The Money, indeed in this very slot, is get to know people. My colleague Gloria Di Piero, in her political interviews, we want to get to know people. And I think sometimes people in business and their PR people who don't want to be blamed for things, it's always, don't talk, don't talk, don't talk. Look, a lot of the journalists...
But hold on just a minute. They also don't get the chance to talk very much.
Sure.
Because, it's 30 seconds, it's 20 seconds,
That's right.
That's all we want.
And the TV industry, of which we are both a part, I think we have just atomised messages. We treat our public as if they're stupid and they can only take 15 seconds or 20 seconds.
Very dangerous.
And so often the public are like, I wanted to hear from that person. And yet you've cut them off literally in the middle of a sentence. It seems to me crazy. And in my view, I wonder if you agree, businesses shouldn't be scared of talking to journalists. Quite often journalists just want things explained and they want to hear from businesses. That's what we try and do on this show. Sometimes you've got to be aggressive. Sometimes you've got to go after wrongdoing and not take no for an answer. But a lot of the time it's just, tell us what's going on. Explain to us your view of the world because it impacts us.
Spot on, absolutely. And that's exactly what I say to my clients. But I think there's also the 2 points here that you make, and that is these short 15-second, 20-second sound bites make it a very, very dangerous place. Because, number one, that's where misunderstandings happen, and they're not often given a chance to correct them. And the second thing is that's when we get a lot of things out of context as well. And you only need to look at the younger generation, and where are they getting all their news from? Social media and these headlines. They are not getting the depth or the different angles or the balance of stories.
The other thing I always advise business people, and I think a lot of people in PR, public relations, don't understand this, but I feel it in my bones intrinsically as somebody who spends a lot of time on live television. If a business leader is worried about how a media organisation is going to cut up what they've said and misrepresent it, do a live interview. You can't, this isn't edited. This is actually happening live and it's on national radio and television. Even if I wanted to make you look bad, which I don't, by chopping up a pre-recorded interview. In some cases, even though live television, which is second nature to us, but obviously a lot of people are very nervous of it, it sounds daunting, but it's often the best way, isn't it?
It is the best way. I think there's also another piece here, and that is really understanding how this industry works. So I think that's really important. I think, like anything, you have to really have a little bit of insight, a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of understanding, because that's where your confidence comes from. And if you're confident about something, or you feel a bit confident, then you're more likely to put yourself forward. And that's for any sector, in any industry, to be honest.
Well, Artie, I'm sorry we haven't got more time to talk today, but it's great to have you on the show here in our Money Talk slot. I think you're quite an unusual person to have on this in this particular slot, but I think it's really good for businesses who watch and listen to On the Money to hear from a seasoned professional like you, giving them PR advice. And I think we've both been honest with our views today. So it's great to have you on the show, Artie Halligan. TV presenter, entrepreneur, public speaker extraordinaire.
Thank you very much. It's like you say, you love the diversity on this GB News, not in terms of just opinions and what people have to say, but even in terms of how they look.
We are a broad church and we welcome all comers.
Love
and that
it.
was Artie Halligan, my latest guest on Money Talks. That's all we've got time for today. Join me tomorrow at 1 p.m, where I'll be with the Small Business Commissioner, Liz Barkley. Will be asking your questions and queries about small and medium-sized enterprises, the engine room of the British economy, employing over 2/3 of us. So do email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet GB News with your questions for the Government Small Business Commissioner. But for now, this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Fine for many today, a lot of cloud around, and it will be damp in the northwest later. But for the time being, actually plenty of dry, settled, bright weather, thanks to an area of high pressure which is edging closer from the west. Weather fronts are approaching, however, around the top of that high, and they will bring some thicker cloud and some rain to Northern Ireland and Scotland later in the day. But for the time being, the thickest cloud actually is across Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia, and that's sinking south into southern parts of England, along with a few outbreaks of rain in places, 1 or 2 showers disappearing from northeast Scotland. And it's across central and eastern Scotland, northern England, where we'll see the best of the sunny spells. 18 to 20 Celsius in the north, 22, 23 Celsius for southern areas. But for many, it's a cool-ish day, and then it turns increasingly damp for Scotland, and there'll be some thicker cloud and some drizzle for Northern Ireland as well. Rain spilling into northern England, North Wales as well overnight, and the wind picking up. So with the breeze and the increasing cloud for most, it's a mild night. Stays clear in the southeast, and here it's a sunny start to the day. There'll be a warmer start compared to this morning, but for many it's a cloudy day, and it will be breezy in the north with the wind gusting over hills and around coasts. Outbreaks of rain, particularly for western Scotland, but they'll be on and off for Northern Ireland, eastern Scotland, northern England, and it will feel cool in the north, but much warmer in the south, 25, 26, perhaps even 27 Celsius. And then we continue to see the breeze and those outbreaks of rain push through Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland overnight. But eventually the rain eases away. And Thursday's a drier day for many, with plenty of sunshine, particularly in the south. Friday, Saturday look increasingly sunny across the country and warmer.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the